Hello everybody and welcome back to another Super Auto Pets tier list. This time we're tackling the Golden Pack. Everybody really seemed to like my tier lists and I want to give my thoughts on this one because I think the Golden Pack is one of the more controversial in the game. There's a lot of pets to go through and of course, per the usual, we're going to kick things off with the changed pets in this pack. So in tier number 1, we're seeing the Chipmunk has been changed. The old level 1 ability was if you sold it, it would replace a the shop food with one free copy of this pet's food perk. Now it has the ability, if you sell it, it stocks one gold copy of this pet's food perk. So it adds an item and it only costs 1 gold. I don't think this is the greatest item, but for early game, you could get like really cheap cherries. That could be huge and incredibly beneficial later down the line. So I think Chipmunk, pretty easy A tier for the time being. Another not that big change is the Bulldog, whose old ability was if the Bulldog was hurt, it would set its attack equal to its health plus 1. Unless I'm not understanding something, this didn't really change except for the wording. So now it's after attack, set attack equal to health plus 1. So kind of the same thing, right? I feel like the same action is happening at the same time, so I don't think it changed. I think the Bulldog is a very strong early tier pet. I like him a lot, and I think you can actually buff him pretty consistently into the late game if you get the proper buffs early on, so easy A tier. Another changed pet is, of course, going to be the Lizard, and I think this was a pretty critical nerf to the Lizard. It goes down from a 1-4 to a 1-3, so it only has 3 HP now. Its old level 1 ability was if it was hurt, it would summon a 3-1 Lizard Tail. Level 2 would be 6-2, and level 3 would be 9-3. And this could be infinite. You could do this literally forever, but instead, it's been nerfed pretty aggressively, so it'll summon a 3-1 Tail if it's hurt, twice per battle, and that also transfers to the 6-2 and the 9-3. It will summon 2 times per turn, and I think that's pretty scary. I think that's pretty interesting, but I don't think that's strong enough to really knock this down. So what used to be an easy S tier, I do think falls into the A tier category now, but I certainly do not think the Lizard is going anywhere. And that same principle applies to what I think is an S tier pet pretty consistently here, is that Guinea Fowl. The Guinea Fowl used to be a 2-5, it's now been nerfed to a 2-4. Nothing else changes, so it'll still gain 2 trumpets if it's hurt, or 4 if it's level 2, or 6 if it's level 3. I think the Guinea Fowl and the Lizard here both fall victim to something interesting. So when the Lizard was a 1-4, almost every single pet before the Lizard in tiers 2 and 1 did not do 4 damage in 1 hit. So you were guaranteed a Lizard Tail, because the only way to get around that would be, okay, you know, an egg that's going to deal 2 damage. Uh-oh, Lizard Tail maybe anyway. So I think the Lizard loses a lot of early game value because there are now pets that deal 3 damage. You're looking at the Sea Urchin, the Squid is a 5-2, the Black-necked Stilt is a 3-2. So the Lizard can be one-shot a lot easier than it used to be, and I think it's a really fascinating change, one that's pretty damaging. The same goes for the Guinea Fowl. Not a lot of pets were doing 5 damage at tier 3 immediately in 1 hit, but 4 damage, that's a lot more achievable, so I think it really does nerf these guys a little more aggressively than we anticipated. Another change later down the line in tier 4 is the Falcon. A pretty aggressive nerf comes through, so they disrupt the synergy of consistency. It used to be when you'd knock out an opponent, you would summon a 3-3, 6-6, or 9-9 copy of this pet, the level of it being whatever level the Falcon may be, and it could work 5 times per battle. That is a lot of times, and now it only works a whopping 3 times. So the stats don't change. You get a 3-3 level 1, 6-6 level 2, or 9-9 level 3. That could only happen 3 times per combat. Not as good, but I think the Falcon is certainly still a very strong pet in the grand scheme of things, so I'm comfortable to keep him there. Another very strong pet, even post-change, I think, is this Nurse Shark. The old level 1 ability was when it fainted, it would spend up to 10 trumpets and deal triple that damage to 1, 2, or 3 enemies, depending on the level of the Nurse Shark. Now it will spend up to 6 trumpets and deal 3 times. So it can still do quite a bit. So it could do 18 to 1 enemy, 18 to 2 enemies, or 18 to 3 enemies. That is a lot of damage to just be tossing out early on, especially now that it only costs 6 trumpets. That feels like a very strong, almost guaranteed pet in that late game toward that tier 5, because even doing 18 damage to 1 pet, that's a lot. That probably knocks a lot, most, if not all of these pets off the table pretty early on and create a 1-number advantage for your team. One of the last pets change, as you can see from the tier list here, is the Highland Cow. It's a small nerf, but I think it's a pretty impactful one. The Highland Cow doesn't guarantee you that same 50-50 golden you were almost guaranteed when you got this thing to a high enough level, but its old level ability was gain 1 trumpet for each 2 health that it has, and then 2 trumpets for 2 health, and 3 trumpets for 2 health, depending on level. But instead, this time, now it's gain 1 trumpet, or 2 or 3, depending on level, per 3 health. So that's a pretty aggressive nerf, all things considered. I mean, you were getting 50%, now you're getting 33% basically of the HP that the Highland Cow has to offer. I think this used to be an S tier. I'm going to put it in the A. This is a very high caliber pack if we haven't noticed that quite yet, but I think there's a lot of great ways for this pack to be played, and I think we're learning that with these changes. A lot of them do feel quality of life and makes the pack a little bit easier to change. And our last changed pet in the Golden Pack is the German Shepherd. Old ability was give 30, 60, or 90% of its attack to a summoned friend. Now it is 25, 50, or 75. Not nearly as strong, but still pretty good, especially in synergy with a couple of other pets that fall in this pack, like the Slug, that we're going to be talking a lot about later on. But I'm going to go ahead and put that German Shepherd in the B tier for right now. Maybe I'll change my own mind down the line, but hey, let's find out. Now to fall back into number order, we talked about the Chipmunk and the Bulldog, but the rest of Tier 1. The Groundhog, gain 1, 2, or 3 trumpets, depending on your level, the level of the Groundhog. I think this is a very consistent early game pet. I think you sell it usually around Tier 3 or 4, but not having it in the early game can be really damaging if you're trying to run a trumpet pack. If you're trying to run trumpets, gotta have some early Groundhogs. Cone Snail, start of battle, give 2, 4, or 6 HP to the nearest pet behind you. This can be very helpful in that Bulldog advantage. I talked about this, I'm going to put it right next to the Bulldog. Very strong early game pet. The Goose, here's the hot take maybe of the video. It removes 1 attack, 2 attack, or 3 attack from the first enemy. Even in the early game, that's not huge. That goes against a lot of what I'm traditionally saying in terms of, oh, you know, the early game you can win by a single HP, but in reality, I just think the Goose really falls short. It's only a 2-2. Removing 1 HP is not going to have the most critical impact that you see compared to a lot of other pets that can be offered at this level, like the Pied Tamarin, a very strong pet. It is a 1-2, and you can spend 1 trumpet to deal 3 damage to 1, 2, or 3 enemies, depending on level. So you can do a whopping 9 damage across the board if you get this thing to level 3. Very strong, very good, and I think it utilizes trumpets really well. Up next is the Possum in Tier 1. One of our last ones, the Opossum, however you choose to say it. But if you sell it, it gives 1 faint pet in your shop, plus 1, 1, 2, 2, or 3, 3. I think it's pretty decent for early game. Not the most impressive, but I'll go ahead and drop it in C tier so we have something in there. But I do want to spend a little more time talking about the Silk Moth, one of our last Tier 1 pets. If the friend in front of it is hurt, it gives 1, 2, or 3 HP, works twice per turn. Early, even somewhat into the later game, this thing is a beast with the Bulldog, especially in the order I just put them. Cone Snail, Bulldog, Silk Moth. So the Bulldog gets a 1, 2, 3 HP buff from the Cone Snail, guarantees it escapes that 1 hit, gets buffed by the Silk Moth again, and its attack stays a little higher, a little more consistently. A very strong combo of these 3 to get you at least to Tier 4 or 5, or Tier 4 or 5, excuse me, before losing any rounds. And then next is the Magpie. I think the Magpie gets a lot of value in other packs that are a little more gold-centric. So you can spend up to 1 gold and gain it back next turn, or 2 or 3 gold, depending on what level the Magpie is. I think I'm down to throw that in the D tier right now. Just not... I don't know, this pack really doesn't fit that vibe to me. I feel like there's other places that can get a little bit more value. We're going to talk about a couple of pets like that. I think the only example of running that would be the Bird of Paradise, but that's all the way down at Tier 6. We're going to talk about that eventually to be one of the last pets we address, actually. Hercules Beetle, 3-4, give friends front to back plus 1 attack for each battle this has fought. So this is a long game pet. I think this can go really well with something like that. I'm blanking on the name, unfortunately. The Silk Moth. Kind of buff it, keep it alive as long as possible, help it do a lot of damage, scale upwards into getting strong and buffing, but that's not usually the play style I bring to the table, so I will throw it in kind of the C tier. I think that temporary attack buff is big, but I really do prefer the pets that are dropping +1/+1 instead of just attack or just damage. The Stoat. Not the greatest pet, all things considered, but can be really cheeky and a lot of fun to use, and I think that fun factor actually buffs the Stoat up quite a bit, in my opinion. So if you sell the Stoat, it summons a level 1, level 2, or level 3 pet, depending on its level, from your current tier as a 1/1. So if you get up to turn 5, okay, there's the Okapi, or the Nyala, that's what I'm talking about. The Nyala, that gains 8 trumpets, or 16 trumpets, or 24 trumpets if it faints at level 3, and that thing's a 1/1. You're just farming 24 trumpets. So it's a very circumstantial pet, but I think it's a really, really fun one. I'm going to throw it into the B tier. Okay, next is the Black-necked Stilt. I did reference this earlier. This is just the better Groundhog, and because of that, I'm throwing it up here in front of the Groundhog, because the Stilt, when it faints, it gains 2, 4, or 6, compared to the 1, 2, or 3 the Groundhog can offer. This is a really good replacement pet when you want to get that Groundhog out of the way. You throw the Stilt in its place, and you make a lot better space for your team to succeed and get those crowns further down the line, those victory trophies. The Squid, a 5/2, spend 1 trumpet to give the first enemy ink, or the first 2 enemies, or the first 3 enemies ink. Attack and ability, deal 3 less damage. I think this is almost stronger for the fact that it's a 5/2 than the ink. I feel like we don't see ink very often in the late game, but 5/2 is not the greatest stat line either. Spend a trumpet, get a little bit of ink in there. Early game, it works, but I'm not huge on it overall. The Sea Urchin, it kind of feels like a better Squid, guys. I'm not going to lie. It comes right in the same tier. It's a 3/2, and if it faints, it removes 5 health from the first enemy, or 2 or 3, depending on the level. If you don't notice, the number often synergizes with that level. So I think this is a pretty strong pet, probably decent B tier, but I don't think it survives super late into the late game. The Doorhead Ant synergizes insanely well with the Emu, down from tier 5 or turn 5, and it's got an ability where if there's an empty front space, it will push itself to the front and gain 4, 8, or 12 HP, depending on its level. The Emu pushes the nearest friend ahead and grants 4, 8, or 12, so instead you're looking at 8, 16, or 24 HP onto the Doorhead Ant. I think there's a lot of really cool ways to work with that, and a lot of good value that it can provide, but it's not a synergy that I work with often. When I use this pack, I'm usually focusing on the trumpets, as that is kind of the main focus, but as I'm doing this tier list, it is showing me that I really should explore the other alternative paths that this golden pack has to offer. The Doorhead Ant is a bit of a staple, a bit of a classic, so we're going to go ahead and throw it in the B tier. And something interesting is going to happen here as we address the Sea Turtle. It's a 2/5, and if a friend is summoned in battle, it gives it 3, 6, or 9 HP. This is very strong because you look at things like the Lizard, you look at things like the Slug, you look at the fact that this is a golden pack, and you see a lot of variety. Or I don't know how to say that. The tiny monkey that summons the orangutan. I will talk about him in a little bit. Where is he on screen here? This guy, Mechake? I'm not sure how to say that, but this is a very strong one. It summons a pet in battle. So the Sea Turtle gets a lot of very impressive synergy throughout this, and I think for that reason it makes them a pretty easy S tier, as it can synergize with an incredible amount of pets. Oh, I can't believe I didn't talk about the Wolf as well. The Wolf summoning 3 pigs that only have 2 HP, or 4 or 6. You could bump that all the way up to 18 HP at some points. I mean, or not actually, hold on. 15 HP, I think. I don't even know. But I think the Sea Turtle is a very strong pet. So the Gazelle coming in next, start of turn, and gain +1/+1 until end of battle for each gold over 10. So this is the Bird of Paradise syndrome, like I talked about earlier. With the Magpie, if you stockpile the gold, this can be very strong, but I think this pack itself doesn't lend to stockpiling cash. You do have things like the Avocado. Okay, great, you can give it a temporary +3/+3. If you've watched my other videos, you know I very much do not like temporary buffs. I like to go for the permanent thing to really deal that full throttle damage consistently across the board, because, oh no, that one time you don't have 2 extra gold, your Gazelle's like a 7/7 in turn 10 or something, and then you're really screwed, and that's not a spot you want to be in. So I think I am going to go ahead and put the African Gazelle, African Penguin is up next. I think I'm going to put the regular Gazelle in the C tier. African Penguin, tier 2, and our last tier 2 pet to discuss. +1 attack, +2 attack, or +3 attack to random friends on the board. I like it. It's simple. It's really strong for early game, but it's not that impressive across the board. Folks, before we jump into tier 3 and up, if you like what you're seeing, a like, a comment, a subscribe could go a really long way. It's the only time I'm going to ask. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate it. All right, turn 3. Muskox. This guy, guess what? Boom, S tier. Possible hot take, don't care. When the friend ahead faints, the Muskox gains +1, 2, 2, 4, or 3, 6. And when you've got something like the Slug on board in this matchup, that's a huge buff, especially when you've got something in there like the the flying fish as well to buff the slugs to keep them alive a little bit longer. When you've got another animal in there like the grizzly bear dealing damage per 2 random enemies, or sorry, per 5 friendly attacks, it damages 2 random enemies. That damage stacks up very quickly, and because of that, I think the muskox works in one of the best combos this pack has to offer. The flea, I think a pretty easy A tier, possibly S tier, but getting it to that level 3 is very hard as it's only a 3-1, and you have to buff it through external means like apples or like things like that. So when it faints, it makes the healthiest enemy weak, and then 2 and then 3 on its level, of course. Very strong pet, one that I like a lot. Royal Flycatcher, enemy summoned. If deal 3 damage to 1 random enemy, and then 6 or 9 damage as well. I feel like this is a pretty summons-heavy deck, but it feels easier to run a summons than run an anti-summon, as this does kind of feel like the only anti-summon pet in this pack. A lot of it feels summon reliance instead of summon stomping. So I think I am going to throw the Flycatcher down here until I kind of maybe think some synergy through. Speaking of synergy, the Surgeon Fish. Spend 2 trumpets to give the nearest friend behind plus 6, 12, or 18 health on the board. So the Surgeon Fish, one of my personal favorites, and it just kind of looks like Dory. So S tier works very well with characters that you want to live for a long time, like that lizard. I think that's a very critical character to bring to the table, or like the grizzly bear, or even the, gosh, what's the name? The cobra. We'll talk about the cobra a bit in the future. Weasel, when it faints, you get plus 1, 2, or 3 gold on your next turn. Decent synergy, plus 3 gold for a 3-3 that in reality is, what, a 6-7? Not super strong. You want to get some buffs in there. And there's no pills, so you can't abuse the beta fish pill kind of insta-buff combo, so it's a little harder to buff pets consistently. I think I'm down to throw the weasel in like the C tier area. Beta fish, easy S tier. I'm pretty sure I've talked about this before in other videos. When it faints, it gives the nearest friend behind plus 4, plus 2, 8, 4, or 12, 6. So 12 damage is a lot, especially in the late game. We talk about, I mean, that's why the Nurse Shark is in the S tier right now, because it can do more than 12 damage to 3 enemies at once. So very consistent, very powerful pet. I think the beta fish is a really strong one. That gold synergy coming from the Meerkat here. Start of battle, give adjacent friends plus 1 attack for every 3 gold spent. If you're gold spamming, if you're farming, I think a best case scenario, you're getting 16 gold. So that's, what is that, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Okay, well, that's 5 extra attack, or 10 or 15 extra attack from the Meerkat, so I do think that's pretty impressive. But with the Meerkat himself having such doo-doo stats, you know, you're kind of giving up an empty spot just to give some temporary attack buff, and it's a pretty high risk. I think I'm comfortable to throw it in that B tier for the time being. Flying Fish, I think a self-explanatory S tier personally. It actually has been nerfed, and I think it's still incredibly strong. If a friend is summoned in battle, you give it 2 experience, 4 experience, or 6 experience, and this works twice per turn, so I think the Flying Fish is very strong, and the experience, of course, is what gets you from level 1 to level 2 and level 2 to level 3. Very strong pet. One of my least favorites in the game, the Baboon. End turn, give 1 random friend from the current shop tier plus 1, plus 2, plus 2, plus 4, or plus 3, plus 6. So it buffs pets very sporadically, and it only buffs specific pets. So if you're running a comp where you've been buffing a Bulldog since turn 1 and you end up with a Baboon on turn 7 or turn 6, it's not going to do much for you because you're running a very low caliber deck. I really like the Osprey. I think this is the next replacement for the Stilt. That's a possible hot take, as this can really help buff animals like the Lizard, and they kind of rock, paper, scissors each other out. But the Osprey summons 1 Groundhog, 2 Groundhogs, or 3 Groundhogs, which in turn gives you more Trumpets down the line if you're running that Trumpet deck. Turn 4, one of my favorites in the game, the Manatee, but I like it more outside of this deck than in it, and I'm going to talk about why right now. The Manatee, take 5 damage and give the nearest friend ahead plus 2, plus 1, or 4, 2, 6, 3. This buff is permanent, but the Manatee only having 11 HP makes it very difficult to stay alive in this circumstance. Is the Silk Moth here to cancel that out? A little bit, yes, but I think we're still seeing the Manatee take a minimum of 2 damage per turn, which helps you really draw out the longevity of those buffs. But when you've got a garlic on this bad boy, when you've got a lemon and a draft behind this thing, and it is taking a net 0 gain, but buffing the pet in front of it over and over and over and over and over, I think the Manatee is one of the easiest S tiers in the game. But in this pack, not having that kind of consistent guaranteed buff combination, I think that kicks it all the way down to about the B tier. The Cuttlefish coming in next. I always go to call it the Squid, as they have very similar abilities. Give the last enemy ink, last 2 enemies ink, or last 3 enemies ink as a little refresher. The attack and ability, deal 3 less damage when a pet is inked, and you don't have to spend any trumpets for it. Pretty valuable. I think about a B tier. Wow, I did not realize how many pets are in this rank. It's already 20 minutes in, and we're still going. The Egyptian Vulture. Knockout, activate, faint ability on the nearest friend behind. So this is pretty huge. This could be the Egyptian Vulture going down. Uh-oh. Guess what's behind it? The Vaquita, you get 50% trumpets for free. Then you're going to get them again when the Vaquita dies. And that's 100 and 150% trumpets. So I think the Egyptian Vulture, if played correctly, very easy A tier. Very easy S tier. We're actually going to drop 2 in a row. Oh my goodness, no, we're not. We're going to drop 3. We're going to drop 4 S tiers in a row. And I'm going to go through every single one of them here out of tier 4. The Antelope. Each friend that faints, you gain 1 trumpet, then 2, then 3 for the levels. If you've got something like a slug on the board or a wolf in there, you're getting guaranteed 10, 15 extra trumpets. That is incredible. I think it's a very valuable pet. The Sea Lion. End of its turn, give friends behind 1 attack and friends ahead 1 health. This is a very good, consistent buff pet that you'll often see me carry into the late end game. I think the Sea Lion, really strong as it is, and offers a lot of versatility of buffing attack or health if you need it, and you don't have to swap that pet out. Vaquita, I just hinted at a moment ago, when it faints, you gain 50% of your current trumpets, then 100%, then 150 by level 3. I think that's a bit of a no-brainer on why that is one of the strongest pets in this entire pack. The Slug, I've talked this thing into the ground. It is a 4/4. When it faints, it summons a 2/2 smaller slug that summons a 1/1 smallest slug. And then by level 3, it is a 6, it is a, I don't even know what it is, an 8/8 that summons a 6/6 smaller slug and a 3/3 smallest slug. So you're always summoning those 3 slugs, but they get stronger, they do a little more damage, they're a little easier to work with. Okay, that's all 4. The Poison Dart Frog. If the friend ahead faints, you deal 3, 6, or 9 damage. This combos really well with the Slug or the Osprey maybe, but I don't think there's a lot of pets toward the late game that this finds some strong synergy with, so I'm comfortable putting this in maybe the B tier. One of the last pets of tier 4 is the Secretary Bird. If 2 friends faint, give the nearest friend ahead 3/3, 6/6, or 9/9. I think the same thing goes for the Poison Dart Frog. Synergizes well with a couple of pets, but not enough for me to be super excited about it. We talked about the Falcon already. Manta Ray, if there's an empty space on your board, gain 2, 4, or 6 gold. If you can get the Manta Ray early by combining pets and forcing a tier 2 that, gives you the 1 store buy-up, I think the Manta Ray is great. But I think it's really hard to run a Manta Ray in this particular set due to the fact that you don't have a lot of space to work with. Maybe if you were running outside of this kit and you had a Triceratops or a Sabertooth or something that can summon a little more consistently, I think that's great. Maybe you can run the Manta Ray with a 50/50 Highland Cow, but the game has changed, and the Manta Ray is a little harder to run than it used to be. So I'm going to put it in that C tier. Here's that animal I can't pronounce. Macaque? Macaque? I don't know, but at the start of battle, summon a 12/12, 24/24, or 36/36 orangutan with the same food perks. So there's not a lot of food perks here. There's the banana, there's the potato, which gives 10 less damage from abilities 2 times. You see the cherries as well, but I think there aren't really that many great abilities in this pack that lend themselves super well to this double synergy. I think it actually works better outside when you can put a garlic or a lemon on it. So D tier for now. I've hinted at the Nyala. I think this is a very easy A tier, maybe even an S tier, but the S tier is getting pretty full. So when it faints at level 1, you gain 8 trumpets, then 16, then 24 trumpets. And that's just very helpful to get 24 trumpets. That's half of your maximum. Very beneficial, very powerful. Beluga Whale eats food. If you feed it any food item, it swallows the leftmost shop pet and release it as a level 1, 2, or 3 after fainting, depending on your own level of this Beluga Whale. Very, very strong with things like the Nyala, like maybe the Lizard, or like the Slug as well. I think it's a bit niche to be running it this late into the set, but you can also synergize it with the Wolf pretty consistently. So there's the B tier. The Wolf, when it faints, it summons 3 pigs that are 3/2, 6/4, or 9/6, depending on level. Very cool, very synergizable. A tier. Silver Fox, again, we're back to that gold perk advantage situation. If you guys can tell, there's very few pets in this pack that work for that gold buff, so it can be very hard to run them, especially when you're going for a tier 5 pet, and it's a 3/6 at best. Like, that is not really what you want to be seeing. For a whopping 1 gold, if you're lucky, it's going to get knocked out early unless you can get some crazy buffs on this thing out the gate. So I think C tier to this. Fire Ant, 6/4. Give your attack to 1, 2, or 3 random friends, depending on level. I like it a lot. It's a pet that's almost intentionally supposed to die, so it can buff the ones behind it. I think it's a very cool effect, one that I should be using more. We're going to call it B tier. Cockatoo. If you buy it, you give 3 random faint friends, +2/1, forced 2, or 6/3. So very cool. Not the strongest, not the weakest, but B tier overall. Right behind it, another classic buff is going to be that blue ringed octopus. When you buy it, you give friends +1/+1. If you get it to levels 2 or 3, it's +2/2 and +3/3. Naturally, very strong. Technically, it's a 1/1 buff to all your pets for only 2 gold. If you buy it, immediately resell it. So that's a pretty strong buff. The Crane, it is a 9/2, and when the friend ahead is hurt, it can offer the Melon perk and 5 attack once, twice, or thrice, depending on the level. A very strong pet overall, but that 2 damage is quite scary when there's things like the Tomato in this pack that deals 8 damage, or when you see kind of those random damagers that offer some chaos across the board. Gonna throw that in the B tier. Emu, I referenced earlier. If there's an empty front space, push the nearest friend ahead and give it 4, 8, or 12 HP. I think this synergizes really well with a lot of pets in this pack. You're looking at the slug, you're looking at the lizard, you're looking at things that want to attack several times, but the one that I talked about it the most with was that doorhead ant, and I think that still stands true. That much HP goes a long way in the late game. A pet that I've never used before, actually, is the Wildebeest. It is a trumpet pet. Spend 4 trumpets to gain the coconut perk, which negates all, and I'm talking all damage, and that can work 3 times by the time you are level 3. It is an 8/6 naturally, so 16 guaranteed damage if you've got 4 trumpets to spare. And if you're at turn 6 and you're trying to even run this thing, you've got to have trumpets somewhere. So I think it's a pretty decent A tier. If it was melon, it'd be B, but coconut does bump it up. Talked about the Highland cow, the catfish. Start of turn, spend 1 gold to activate buy ability on the nearest friend ahead. Very cool concept. I like it a lot, but unfortunately, I don't think it lends itself in this pack super well. There's not a lot of high value pets that offer a buy effect, I think. There's a lot of other ways to get value than a 3/3 catfish, but I think in other packs, custom packs, it can work really well. The Pteranodon, I've actually never said that out loud. When the friend, I didn't move the catfish, that's so embarrassing. D tier. Pteranodon, when the friend faints, or when a friend faints, holy cow, if it was a faint pet, activate its ability again. This works once, twice, or thrice, depending on the level of the Pteranodon. This can work really well with something like the Sea Urchin. Removing 5 HP twice or thrice could be huge, but I don't think there's a lot of faint pets in this deck that are gonna work super well. Maybe the Vaquita can synergize incredibly well, but only having 1 example to offer, it isn't the strongest, so we're gonna throw that in the B tier. Warthog, give random friends +1/1, 2/2, or 3/3 for every 3 attack this has. Pretty self-explanatory. It can offer a pretty good buff to your friends if you can buff the snot out of this thing. Pretty easy A tier. The Cobra with the Onion perk, which moves it to the back once it enters the front 1 time. When the friend ahead attacks, you hit a random enemy for 20, 40, or 60% damage. Pretty strong, pretty consistent, and I think it could work really well with another pet like the Grizzly Bear, who's coming up next. A tier to the Cobra, S tier to the Grizzly Bear. A 6/6 that deals 6, 12, or 18 damage to 2 random enemies for every 5 friendly attacks. You're looking at the Slug, that's already 3 guaranteed if they're all one-shot. And if you've got this thing in the very back, you're looking at least 10 attacks before the Grizzly Bear even has the chance to fire. So a possibility of 12, 24, or 36 free damage just for having a Grizzly Bear on your team. I love it. Bird of Paradise. For every 7 gold you spend, give 3 random friends 1/1, 2/2, or 3/3. Pretty good, but only getting 1/1 for 7 gold isn't the greatest, especially when the Bird of Paradise itself is only 3/3. I think I'd like to see a couple of changes from it. I'm gonna go C tier on it. Possible hot take. And finally, closing things out is, of course, going to be our Oyster. You love to see it. A 2/10. And if you sell it, you gain 3, 6, or 9 gold, and then you get 1 gold for selling it. And so this is just a little bit of a gold machine. If you don't like what you see in your store, you can buy and sell this really quickly to give yourself just a few extra gold, and that can have a pretty large value on your team overall. All right, folks, this is a long video. Thank you so much for watching, but these are my final thoughts on the current state of the Super Auto Pets Golden Pack here, June 20th, 2023, just 3 days before my own birthday. Thank you so much for watching. Check your posture, drink some water. Don't forget to love each other, and maybe like and comment and subscribe on this video because it means a lot. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.